Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello and welcome to this series of episodes on explaining the last two units in our syllabus. And these two units is very important, and so we have to explain them. So starting from the first lesson in unit 3, which is the solar eclipse, starting from this point, which is how the shadow is formed. Well, the shadow is formed when a dark object gets in the way of the light and blocks a part of it. What does that mean? Well, by looking at this picture, we will see that the tree is blocking the light from the sun, and hence it creates a shadow. This shadow is formed because the tree is getting in the way of the light of the sunlight and blocks a part of it. Taking another example, which is really what we will study today, which is the solar eclipse, is that when the moon is in between the earth and the sun is sending its light, but the moon by a specific way blocks the light comes from the sun in a specific area on the earth. So the shadow will be formed too in this specific area. So this phenomena is called solar eclipse. And if we want to give a definition, the solar eclipse is the astronomical phenomenon which occurs when the earth, the moon and the sun are nearly on one straight line, with the moon is in the middle between the earth and the sun. And this is the solar eclipse. Discuss it furthermore. If we take a look at this picture, well, the moon is in between the sun and the earth, and it is good to know this is not the scale. This is not a true scale, because the sun is really much greater than the earth and the moon, and of course the distances are also not true. This phenomena occurs only in the morning, because as we see here, the part that is facing the sun is the part in which the solar eclipse occurs, and this happened only on the morning. The earth and the moon move in an oval orbit. Oval orbit means it's not a perfect circle as we see here, but rather it takes a specific curve like that, and from the other side, and the rotation keeps like that. We understand here the occurrence of the solar eclipse and how that happened. To know the components of the solar eclipse, we have to perform a specific activity to explain how the solar eclipse is formed. The first part from the activity, as we see here, we have a light source, like the torch, and we have a tennis ball and the screen. We will demonstrate the ball as the moon and the screen as the earth, and of course the light source as the sun. And by putting the tennis ball between the screen and the light source, with the tennis ball is nearer to the screen. What is the observation here? We will observe that first, the formation of umbra. The umbra is the shadow area, the dark shadow area, which is this part. And the second observation is that there is a formation of penumbra, and the penumbra is a semi-shadow area, which is this part. Exactly. So this is the umbra and this is the penumbra. And we have a demonstration picture here. As we said now, we have two shadows, the umbra and the penumbra. The umbra is the fully shaded area, and the penumbra is the partially shaded area. The umbra called a total eclipse, and the penumbra called the partial eclipse. Total eclipse because it's really dark and we can't see the sun from this part, but we can see part of the sun from the other part, which is the penumbra. Another demonstration, as we see here, the umbra is this part and the penumbra is the part outside of the umbra, I mean the semi-shaded area. And observe how much small the part that is taken from the earth in the umbra, and how large the other part, which is the penumbra, that is taken from the earth, I mean that covered the earth. And of course this is the total eclipse and this is the partial eclipse. Now the second part from the activity, we will move the tennis ball away from the screen. And the observation here, the first one, the umbra doesn't reach to the screen, but instead it is the antumbra. Okay, the umbra is this part, and yes, it doesn't reach the screen, but instead flip picture of the umbra, which is called the antumbra, which is this part. The second observation is the formation of the penumbra, which is the semi-shadow area, as before. We want to see this part in the real. Well, now the moon is moving far from the earth, so the umbra doesn't reach to the earth, but instead it is the antumbra, and of course the other part, which is the penumbra. The same here, again, the umbra is this part, but it doesn't reach the earth, but instead it is the antumbra, which is the small part here, and of course we have the penumbra, which is the semi-shadow area. So we want to conclude some conclusions. First, when the moon comes between the Earth and the Sun, but nearer to the Earth, which is the first case, remember? During its rotation in its oval orbit, it appears equal in size to the Sun, so it blocks the Sun completely, as we see here. We see a total eclipse, so we can't see the Sun from the Emperor. We see the Sun like this part here. And the second conclusion, when the moon comes between the Earth and the Sun, but further from the Earth. Remember the second case? In a higher orbit from the Earth. Well, in a higher orbit from the Earth means that the moon is farther from the Earth. It moves far from the Earth. It appears smaller than the Sun. So we actually see a part from the Sun, like this picture. The Emperor, this part, doesn't reach to the Earth, but instead it is the Antempera. And we see the Sun like this picture. So we see part from the Sun, not like in this case. What is the difference between partial and total eclipse? Well, first, in the total eclipse, the Sun is totally blocked by the moon, so we can't see the Sun. And the partial eclipse, which is two types here, and we will discuss these furthermore right now. So, a general conclusions, the solar eclipse phenomenon occurs when the moon passes between the Sun and the Earth, casting its shadow on the Earth's surface. And the second conclusion, the type of the solar eclipse changes according to the distance between the moon and the Earth. If the moon is near to the Earth, there is Emperor and Penumbra, and if the moon far from the Earth, it is Antempera and Penumbra, during its rotation in its oval orbit around the Earth. So what is the types of the solar eclipse? First, it is the total eclipse and partial solar eclipse, and at the end, annular solar eclipse. In the total solar eclipse, which is the first case if you remember, and if we want to give it a definition, it is the type of solar eclipse in which we can't see the Sun completely. The moon is blocking the Sun completely, and it is formed in a shadow area, which is Emperor of the moon. Partial solar eclipse is that it is a type of a solar eclipse in which we can see a part from the Sun, like in this picture, and it is formed in a semi-shadow area, which is the penumbra. And the last one, which is the annular solar eclipse, it is a type of solar eclipse in which the Sun appears as a lighted range, and it is formed when the moon is a higher orbit from the Earth. I mean, the moon is far from the Earth. Very small note here. The solar eclipse phenomena doesn't last more than 7 minutes and 40 seconds, and it is good to know it is not every year. Well, we have here safety precautions on observing the solar eclipse. We mustn't look directly at the Sun in the ordinary days, and the doctors advise us to use special glasses to observe the solar eclipse, as we see in the picture here. These glasses are special glasses. And we've reached to the last of this lesson and completing the second lesson in the next time. Goodbye.